Welcome to Top Stock Picks. I am your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm here with you to launch a new weekly podcast as an adjunct to my weekly radio show, Turning Hard Times into Good Times, and that's a show that airs every week, every Tuesday, in fact, at Voice America Business Channel at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. This podcast was recorded on March 27th, 2017, and it is the very first podcast under the Top Stock Picks banner. Believing that we are in the early stages of a major bull market in precious metals and not finding a sufficient amount of time to expand coverage of the many junior mining companies on my radio show, I have chosen to begin providing additional coverage with the help of independent newsletter writers to share some of their favorite ideas with you on a weekly basis. Specifically, newsletter writers who have agreed to be a part of this podcast are those who speak at the Metals Investor Forum that's held 3 times a year in Vancouver. Those letter writers, in addition to myself, are Eric Coffin, Brent Cook, Joe Masmader, Gwen Preston, John Kaiser, Brian London, and Jordan Roy Byrne. I plan to have 1 or 2 of these letter writers on my show each week, as well as the CEOs of some sponsors who may wish to share their stories about their companies with you from time to time. These weekly recordings will be posted at jtaylormedia.com on Tuesdays of each week, so I hope that you will make a habit of listening. Go to jtaylormedia every Tuesday to learn about some of the profit-making opportunities during this bull market and also to be aware of some of the risks inherent in the high-risk, high-reward junior mining sector. My guest for this first Top Stock Picks podcast is Eric Coffin, who along with Scott Gibson are responsible for putting together one of the best mining shows I have attended in my 35 years of involvement in the junior mining sector. I'm talking about the Metals Investor Forum, held 3 times a year at the Georgia Hotel in downtown Vancouver. I consider Eric to be a very good friend. I have known him now for about 3 decades, starting when he and his late brother David worked as a team in putting together one of the best, if not the best, letters on junior mining exploration stocks. There is little wonder that the highly regarded letter writer Bob Bishop selected Eric and David to take over that letter when Bob Bishop retired. When David suddenly and unexpectedly left our world, many people wondered how Eric could possibly pick up the pieces now that half his team was gone. But David's death, which followed shortly after the passing of David and Eric's father, was not all the adversities that Eric would face. It wasn't long after that he lost his lovely wife, leaving him with 2 still young children under his care. I have spoken to various people in the mining industry who have marveled at the excellent work Eric has continued to carry out despite facing all those hardships. Not only has he continued to write a top-notch newsletter that remains one of the best in the business, but he has raised those young children into their early adulthood. From all that I know about them is that they are doing exceptionally well. So through all of that, I have come to deeply admire Eric, and am so glad to count him as a friend and a person who provides great investment ideas to me that I share with my own subscribers from time to time. You can learn more about Eric's newsletter by going to Eric Coffin's HRA Journal and his special delivery alert letter by visiting hraadvisory.com. That's hraadvisory.com. Knowing Eric as I do, the comments about the 2 companies he wants to highlight today are likely to be fairly thorough, at least for non-technical listeners. I'm planning to cut up this discussion into 2 segments. Eric wants to talk about Adamera Minerals Corp. And then Vendetta Mining Corp. So in the first segment, we'll hear what Eric has to say about Adamera. That's a gold exploration company with the potential for a major discovery in western Washington state. The second segment will cover Vendetta Mining Corp. And that's a company developing a sizable zinc deposit in Australia that has great prospects for a takeover, assuming exploration goes as planned. Eric has selected both companies because, in his opinion, they have the potential to reward shareholders with gains of several-fold over their current share prices. So let's say hello to Eric Coffin. Welcome, Eric, to Top Stock Picks, and thanks for joining me again today.
That's great. Interesting new idea you got going here.
Well, I think the idea when we're in a bull market is to try to find exciting exploration plays that can result in a few 10-baggers along the way. And I know that you've been as good as anybody during good markets to find those kinds of companies. You are an early-stage exploration newsletter writer, and so it's I'm really glad that you could join me today. And I know that in your note to me this morning you suggested there are a couple that you would like to highlight, a couple of companies you'd like to highlight. One is Adamera Minerals Corp. and the other is Vendetta Mining Corp. And both of those are companies that I have in my newsletter, so I'm really delighted that you picked those two to talk about today. Well, let's start out with Adamera. Trades in Toronto under the symbol ADZ, and you can buy it down here in the States as I have under the symbol DDNFF. I have 88 million shares outstanding, and in Canadian dollars trading at 13.5 cents or something like that in that area recently, giving it a market cap, a really minuscule market cap of only around 10 or 12 million in Canadian money and under 10 million in US dollars. So Eric, in a note that you sent to me this morning, you stated, and I quote, management started out looking for moderate-sized, high-grade gold deposits in mine-friendly western Washington state, but when the data didn't fit quite their geological model, they came up with a new model that fit the facts that they have been coming across in their exploration. And then you stated the new model has huge implications for the company and its shareholders. Can you talk about the geological assumptions the company is now working on and what the implications may be for shareholders?
Yeah, there's basically two in that area. It's broadly known as the Republic campus. Produced about 6 million ounces of high grade from 7 or 8 different mines. And I was going to say historically, but actually even currently, the companies that have produced in there, like Kinross and Echo Bay, they've always considered the main deposit type there to be either. I mean, it varies depending on which company you ask, but one would tell you VMS, the other one would tell you Skarn. And that was the model that Marco Levava and his team started out with, and it was a regional model. They picked up, to start with, some property around an old Kinross Echo Bay mine called Overlook. And they did a bunch of work at their surrounding property that they called Oversight, put a few holes in it with a winky drill. I think it was a couple of years ago. I mean, I remember going out and actually visiting the site when they were drilling. And they got a couple of interesting hits, but they couldn't make any sense out of what they were seeing in the drill holes. It didn't seem to be matching the model that all the majors had laid out at all. Mm-hmm. In fact, it sort of seemed to be upside down. And they struggled sort of trying to find a way to make what was in the drill holes fit the model. You know, they tried like fold models, and maybe it's been overturned, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. They finally, things started to change about a year later when they got access to another nearby past producer called Belcher. Belcher was an open pit, and getting access to that allowed them to actually go into the pit and really have something to map properly and look at how these different structures related to each other. And they came to the conclusion that the prevailing model was just wrong. They found all sorts of evidence that what they were really dealing with is what's called sediment-hosted gold. Uh-huh. These deposits are a lot more common in Nevada. There's a couple of big gold camps in China that have the same model. It's a fairly common model. It's just never been applied to this area. Mm-hmm. Once they did that, it really kind of opened up their eyes for a couple of reasons. One is that the size potential for sediment-hosted gold deposits is significantly bigger. I mean, some of them are quite large. Some of the ones in Nevada are quite big. The ones in China go up to about 3 million ounces. But it also meant they had to really go back to the drawing board and look at which rock units and which structures were really the ones they should be focused on. They realized they were probably looking in some of the wrong places, and maybe the guys in the past had too. So what they did, you know, it took a long time to advance this because they were in the middle of a bear market. They had no money, so they were just doing everything on a shoestring. Once things turned last year and they were able to raise some money, they basically did a very broad mapping campaign through the area that highlighted a whole bunch of areas that they didn't actually have claims on. So first order of business last year was actually getting more ground. They've expanded their ground by about 1,000% over the last 12 months or so. Yeah. They did about a 6,000 or 7,000 sample soil survey on a bunch of grids in different areas. They, again, still in the money-saving mode, they ran all those through using an in-house XRF. XRF is useless for gold, but you can use it to pick up pathfinder elements. Mm-hmm. And they've apparently generated a whole series of anomalies from those, and perhaps the most important thing they did was the flying airborne survey over the region with VTEM and magnetics.
Uh-huh.
And one thing that shocked me when Mark told me this area has never actually had an airborne flown over it, which is bizarre given that it's a pretty successful mining camp. He was the first one to do it. They're just now interpreting all the anomalies. There's a sort of a contract geophysicist working with the company. They've been spitting out new targets for the last month now, and this is going to go on for the next couple of months as they work their way through all these different surveys. But they've got half a dozen new targets, very strong-looking V10 targets, and a lot of these have backup from geochemistry and structural studies and pH. There's probably going to be, it sounds like there'll be probably another half a dozen first order targets that we'll hear about in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then they move on to secondary. The bottom line here is, for the first time ever, these guys are probably going to have something like 10 to 20 targets to deal with a better market and much better liquidity on the stock. He's getting warrant exercises. He just had one set of warrants expire on Friday. I don't know yet how much money he got from those, but it sounds like he probably got a few $100,000 from that. This is not an area that's expensive to work, so I think what we're going to see here is them doing a drill program and testing 5 to 10 targets with one program. To my mind, it's set up as kind of a classic momentum drill speculation. You see a few of these every year that the market latches onto, and if you look at the way and the volume Adamera has been trading the last 3 or 4 weeks since they started rolling these targets out, I think this is going to be one of this year's momentum drill specs. So I think it's got a pretty good move in it even before they start announcing drill results. And this type of stock is the type, if you're smart about how you play it and you get in early and you trade some stock out ahead of results, you can give yourself a pretty cheap speculative bet on a drill play. I mean, that's why I like momentum type ones, because they allow you to do that trade where you buy it early and get some stock off before results, and you've got low average cost stock to play a multiple target drill program.
Eric, when do you expect we might see some drill results? How far off might that be?
It was a pretty heavy snow winter all through the region. They're just starting to get the snow melt now. He's working on getting drill permits. These targets are fairly widely spread through the area. He's got half a dozen different properties. So I expect he's going to get sort of a rolling set of drill approvals from the state, from the BLM, as he works through different areas and applies for them. But he's hoping to have a drill turning by the end of April. It's largely going to be dependent on snow, but the snow is melting now. So he's hoping by the end of next month the drill is already going to be turning by that point. I mean, normally it would be earlier, but they actually got quite a bit of snow in the Republic this year, which is unusual.
Eric, are these targets are they relatively shallow? Do you believe? And also, are they? Go ahead.
The ones that we modeled so far by Martin Saint-Pierre, the geophysicist, are anywhere from, I know one said it's probably just below overburden, so it's like 20 or 30 meters deep.
Good.
They go down to anywhere from that to 200 or 300 meters deep. The classic sediment-hosted, and this is what several of the old deposits look like, is sort of flat line.
Yeah.
So unless they're lucky enough for it to be sitting right at the surface, they're probably going to be blind. Although one of the mines in the area called Lamefoot that recently finished producing, that one's actually vertical, but what they're thinking is that was the same model, but it just got turned on its side.
Sure.
And in a case like that, it may be closer to the surface, but they're assuming these are all going to be underground targets, which obviously is easier to permit anyway.
Right. I think in that part of Washington State, probably not so easy to do open pit mining, and from a permitting point of view.
Yeah, I don't think it's impossible. I mean, Washington is one of those places where it definitely, how far west you are has a really big impact. If they were on the other side of the Cascades, I'd say forget about it. There's no way in hell to get permits. But the Republic area is a mining area. The biggest employer, and they're just ceasing operations now because they're running out of ore, is the Kinross mill that's just north of Republic. And that's, I'm not sure what the exact number of employees is there right now, but it's, I think, 300 or 400 people, and losing those jobs is a pretty major blow.
Yeah. Well, I know.
If he found something mineable, I think the locals would throw him a parade. I don't think you'll get opposition from the usual suspects, but the locals themselves, I think he'd have huge backing from the locals.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ideas that made this attractive to me was the notion that there could be some custom milling in the neighborhood, which could really reduce startup costs, and if they decide, for the project, if there is a project, and maybe there could be something bigger than that, though, in mind now, possibly, huh?
Yeah, I think he's gone from targeting. I mean, when he started out, his game plan was to try to find something, and the rationale was that if I find something small, as long as it makes sense for Kinross to mine it and put it through their mill, this whole thing can make sense, and it wouldn't need to be very big to meet those criteria. If a couple 100,000 ounces would probably be more than enough if Kinross could permit it. I think he shifted from that to I'm going after big targets, and there's a couple of ways this can evolve. Either I do a deal with Kinross, or I find something big enough that it's standalone, or alternatively, whoever buys it at Adamera just turns to Kinross and buys their mill. Because right now, if they can't get feed for it, that mill's it's not an asset for Kinross, it's a liability. Because
Right.
we have to deal with the reclamation, and that's not chump change. You're talking 50 to 100 million bucks, I would think, to
Right.
claim it. And Kinross apparently promised the region, the town republic, if you will, that they would keep on care and maintenance for 5 years, because they know the locals obviously are hoping that somebody finds something that allows them to restart production and get those jobs back.
All right. Well, Adamera Minerals has got only, as I mentioned, only 88 million shares of stock. Are they pretty tightly held, Eric?
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, there's a group of fairly large shareholders, management and the board of directors. I'm not sure what their exact holdings are, but it's at least 10%, between probably closer to 20, I would think.
Yeah.
There's a few other guys that have supported the company all that long, like me, that own it. But other than that, it's probably not that widely held, because until recently, when it really started getting some attention, it was, he was kind of going back to the well with the same guys over and over again. So all of those guys, there's probably a group of 20 guys that are fairly big positions.
Well, the main point is that it's a very, very minuscule market cap, and if something is discovered here that's economically viable, and especially if it's large and economically viable, you talk about chump change. That's the way people will be looking at the current market cap of this company. No guarantees, never is in this business. It's high risk, high reward. And so, Eric, just one last question before we go on to Vendetta. How would you suggest to your readers that they play this? I mean, it is high risk, high reward. How should they play it?
I mean, well, what I've been telling readers for the last couple of months, ever since he started rolling out this new model and these new targets, is look, the way to play. It felt to me like something that was going to become a momentum stock. And I said the way to play momentum stock is you've got to be willing to be one of the early adopters.
Yeah.
You want to be playing the market. You don't want the market playing you, and that means you try to get in early. And if it has a good run, say it runs to, I'm just pulling numbers out of the air here, let's say it runs to 25 or 30 cents before they've got drill results out. If you were a buyer at 10, well, you sell part of your stock and bring your cost down to a nickel, bring it down to zero for that matter. And then you've got a free ride on a high-risk drill play. And yeah, it is a high-risk drill play, but if you can give yourself a free ride, that's the way to play these things.
That concludes the first segment of this week's Top Stock Picks podcast. But don't go away, because Eric will be returning with me for the second segment of this week's show to talk about Vendetta Mining Corp. And that seems to be in a very good position to build a valuable zinc mining project from the zinc bull market that seems to still be in the very early stages. So I hope that you will join me in the second segment of today's Top Stock Picks podcast.